Well, hello and welcome to this session of the Global FinTech Fest titled Changing Consumer Behavior and Transformation of Payments. We have a panel of industry heavyweights for this discussion. Ms. Praveena Rai, Chief Operating Officer, National Payments Corporation of India. Mr. Madhivanan Balakrishnan, Chief Operating Officer, IDFC First Bank. Mr. Sajid Sivanandan, Managing Director and Business Head, Google Pay. And Mr. Anirban Mukherjee, Chief Executive Officer, PayU India. May I now request Praveena to please take over the proceedings.
Thank you very much. And, welcome Madhi, Sajid and Anirban to the discussion, and welcome to all the audience we have for the amazing panel discussion I'm sure we have. They've left a very difficult topic for us after covering all the digital and, payment ones. So this is on consumer behavior, and consumer behavior is never an easy one, right? But it's a very interesting topic, and I think it speaks to the subject of digital payments very well. The journey of consumer behavior change goes through awareness, trial, and ultimately loyalty, and we've got to win a lot of people over. If you look at digital payments, I think we are at a point where it's not really the innovators. We are somewhere in the early adoption stage. I think there's still a long way to go if you look at a very sort of classic adoption curve when it comes to consumer behavior. And consumer behavior is difficult to put your finger on because it's about winning the hearts and minds of people, and ultimately when they're making that instinctive decision on what behavior they want to display, you want them to go in a particular way. So with that backdrop, I want to start with Sajid. Sajid, if you look at how consumer behavior is typically driven, the very first thing that comes to our mind is, what in parlance, local parlance, we'd call the carrot and stick approach, which is really operant conditioning around how incentives play a role. Where the user is saying, "What's in it for me? Why should I change?" And from there, it moves into trial, planned behavior with triggers, and we have examples of pedometers and the iPhone with the Fitbit. It sort of gives you the sparkles every time you hit 1,000 steps, and you feel so great about it, right? So all of those elements coming in, and I think Google does use some of these elements. So can you talk to us a little bit about the journey of consumer behavior change thus far? And in these spaces, what has been your experience?
Well, thank you, Pravina, and thank you for having me on this panel as well. On the note of carrot and stick, just so you know, I think Google is only about the carrots, but others come after us with sticks, just to be clear. So we are, very, very sort of user focused, as I think. Uh, I think one of the things that we've sort of learned is it's important to be able to, I think, really show true value to the user in order to in order for them to kind of really embrace whatever service it is that we will. Just carrots alone without true value is right. And so I think if you think to some of the things that we worked on, I think what really stands out, for example, is scratch cards. I think scratch cards really stood out for us. Uh, Scratch cards really kind of worked well for us in terms of how it started to drive user behavior, how it started to drive a certain kind of reward, if you will. Users got excited about the notion of getting something when they actually used us. But if you thought about if it was only going out a scratch card, look, I think beyond a point in time, whilst it may be great for the user, look, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for us as a business. And so the reality is that it's important that aligned with the carrot, that we are also providing true use to the user. And when you start to create conditions like that, you start to see stickiness sort of result, right? So carrot times value is equal to sort of stickiness or retention, growth, and engagement. All of the time, all of the things that really matter to build any business. So that's the way I think we've seen this kind of play out, at least in Google Pay. That's the way we've seen this play out in other products as well that Google as a company have released, where it's really about true value, something that solves something fundamental for a user that really drives.
Thank you, Sajid. Great point there. So primarily you're saying, look, the incentive creates the trial, but ultimately people stay on and people are continuing to use the platform and the product, because of the actual value they're getting out of it. Great. So Madhi, I'll move to you from there, and we're probably moving backwards. Sajid spoke to us about a trial and stickiness and loyalty after that. But I think the banks have really been the original agents of change, right? So created the first awareness, moving from the good old days from check to electronic payments was where that journey probably started. While we talk of cash to digital today, it's not been a yesterday story. It's probably been for the last 20 years. So you have driven that aha moment, right, for the customer, saying, okay, I really enjoy, or I want to do it in a different way because this is what it means. And it could have been different across customer segments. Reinforcements could have played a different big role there. So can you talk to us a little bit about the journey thus far when it comes to consumer behavior change on digital payments?
No, thank you, Praveena. I'll pick up from where Sajid left. At the core of it lies value. I mean, how are we adding value to whatever we do, whether it be payments, whether it be loans, whether it be the ability to, experience a very simplicity around liability businesses or whatever be it, anything in the banking world. And what is core to banking is trust. And if you are able to build that, and that will, irrespective of whichever product you go to, not just to banking, but the trust is an underlying factor, and that will always remain there. And when you're banking with a particular entity, then you look for, can I trust my hard-earned money, put it there, and then when I get into transactions, can I do it in a very anxiety-free manner, etc. So that's a core underlying value. But banking at the same time, while it might be very essential and core, has reasonably had a slow progress in terms of change. And like you correctly pointed out, I think we had instruments like checks, which then maybe convert, which always came with a lag. So in today's world, the aha moment is actually in terms of people's ability to do what they want and experience that process happening in front of them in the hands of a small, an equipment called a mobile phone. And I think that has created magic. So it is, earlier we used to, if I were to just give an example of the innovation and the change in banking, the banking world was centered around the branch as its, as a core concept. Consumers need to walk into a branch, present them physically, and that's how the process evolved. Now look at it today. It has, in fact, in between today and yesterday, there was this new world where you moved to the ATM, from the ATM moved to the internet, and from the internet you moved to the mobile banking. Even then, the UI, the UX journeys, the design journeys were always centered around trying to replicate what we used to do in the physical world into the digital world, and that's okay with. But value actually came in when banks and various other entities in this ecosystem started reimagining banking, payments, lending from the customer's perspective and from that device which he started holding in his hand, and how were these journeys starting to be, and that's opened up so many possibilities. I think that's, and with that accompanied thing came in things which are very important, not just trust, but a great customer experience, a very simple user interface, something which is very, very idiotic proof and is very intuitive. I think these are the changes that are coming, and this combined with value is dramatically raising awareness levels, is raising the interest for people to try it out. And you top it up with what Sajid does, I mean, give away scratch cards to people, and maybe somebody like my daughter feels so excited that she keeps doing it. And when what else do you want? And,
Madhi, she's doing it because she sees great value.
Okay, that's why I'm not. There's an underlying value, and that is the top of the great experience, and there is a reward. So I just wanted to finish with another 30 seconds, Pravina, if you give me the time. See, if you look at credit cards, it's one of the oldest products. I mean, all of us here in this room know how, and what is the amount of change that it has done has been in terms of the usage and activities. But if you look at the physical form, it's still that plastic. Maybe it gets rendered on the phone now. The carrot at that time, 20 years back, when we launched in my earlier organization, the carrot was, what is it that the credit limit that you're giving? How are you getting a wider segment to the picture? There was no stick at all. There was no bureau. So people used to, the intent of the person to pay back what's determined by every bank's unique experience. In today's world, this combination of a payment mechanism with data flow and the kind of data exhaust that is created gives us a fantastic opportunity to reimagine every aspect of that product, just as an example. So I want to leave it with that, and then maybe pick it up as we go along.
That's great. So you've really gone and touched upon the whole reimagination of the space and really creating something very unique and different that then just creates the pull factor for the behavior change, to be driven on the back of course, trust. Great. So Anirban, we'll move to you. I think, you drive change in a slightly different space while you interact very closely with the consumers. I think your forte is around the merchants. Factors that led to trial and adoption there, and how much of it was around self-efficacy, merchants really truly believing that there was a problem being solved, a value being generated, versus some sort of a social learning. What were not just what helped change, but were there things that didn't work? What was that early phase all about, and where do you think the situation is today?
Yes, thank you, Pravina. On the merchant side, I think, some part of the change has happened, but payments is a classic two-sided business. We are seeing a lot of customer adoption, but till we see much more merchant adoption, it's like all of India wouldn't digitize. And merchants are still in the very early stages of their adoption. Large merchants and e-commerce merchants so big box retailers and e-commerce merchants have certainly adopted. But if you look at the small merchants, they are still in many ways, because their customers are moving to digital, they are moving to digital as well. But many of them are still reluctant participants, so to speak, especially as you go beyond tier 2 cities, right? As you go to tier 3, 4, 5, 6 cities. And that is where I think, for me, it comes down to, since this is about consumer behavior, for me, it comes down to vitamin versus painkiller, right? Or something I have to do, necessary cost of doing business versus something I love doing. I think from the angle, acceptance of payments is just the start, right? For them, unless there is more in it, right? Unless there is, and I think it's two things. It's unless this helps them increase sales and increase commerce by connecting them to the new generation of Indians, by helping people order digitally to them, by helping, increase ticket sizes when consumers have credit. And unless it's about lending lines, it's the digital exhaust that Madhi talked about, flow-based lending using the payments data that you see on them. Unless you solve those two bigger problems, which is a merchant, help me increase my sales, help me get me based lending that I don't always have access to, especially if I am a smaller size merchant. And then the adoption is much more rapid, right? Today, the adoption is happening, as you said, because it's part of a two-sided network and their customers are adopting. And I think the government and NPCI and all of us have done a lot, right? To make it formless, make it QR based, link based, reduce the costs a lot, right? That's why he's doing it. But for them to fully jump onto this, and because it's a two-sided network, this merchant adoption then will drive consumer adoption. That will only happen when we have broader value. It comes back to value, right? Payments by itself might or might not be value enough for these small SMBs, right? For them, and India is mostly small SMBs, right? And big box retail is only the bulk of the country. I think it's about more value and a broader platform based on payments, right? But beyond payments, that then I think gets more merchants onto this bandwagon much more wholeheartedly.
That's great. I think you're kind of surmising in the same space to say it's not just about behavior change, but giving them value, and the value itself creates the change. In our own research with merchants, I think it's repeatedly come out that the merchant primarily does whatever he needs to do to drive the business. That's the point you're making. So if he gets new users in, and if he has 20% of his users coming in telling them that they want to pay in a particular way, then he will make that payment mechanism work. And if he gets credit and other benefits on top of that, then that's really the icing on the cake. So that's great. I think from here we can move into the current times. If you look at another big driver of change, it's really strong external factors, and we are living amidst one. As we speak, the pandemic situation has been the biggest tipping point that we have ever come across till now. Perhaps after the demonetization space that we would have seen in this area. And we see people walking around with masks and washing hands and all of that stuff that they believe is going to keep them safe. The social norms the reference around masks especially is very interesting, because if somebody is seeing somebody walk around without a mask, then it's like, typically, look at that person walking out there without a mask, right? So whether you like it or not, you're wearing a mask and walking around. So that same sort of extension seems to have come into the digital payments world as well, in the way both merchants are dealing with their side as well as users. And we are seeing reports where people have come into the space of digital payments, people who've never tried it before. So, Madhi, can I come to you? And I think, if you look at banks, they dealt with the pandemic space very differently. Probably creating a very wide message for people not to necessarily crowd into branches, move more digital. How has that worked, and how are you seeing the change that is there in consumers in this period now?
That's very relevant question, Pravina. Two things have happened, I think, and this is happening to us like a sense of deja vu. It's happening again. When demonetization happened, a similar kind of story prevailed within the entire banking system, wherein there was an external force which was forcing us to go in a particular way, and people who never ever used digital, picked it up like nobody's business. So if you were to go by our classical IDA theory, the awareness came in because the government drove something dramatic. The interest was forced, and then they started using it. A big chunk of the people converted, some of them dropped off. So there was a new normal which created. I think the same story is happening all over again. This time, the only reason is its nature and it is health, and a very different kind of a fear as a motivation is driving the shift into digital. So whether the number of people who walk into branches, the adoption for anything which is of a digital, while it is still in the essential world, yeah, I wouldn't call it as it's still a crucible of the total basket of products that a customer might want to buy. Like even when it comes to banking, the number of account opening that is happening on a pure digital manner, enabled by very good regulations, whether it be a video KYC or an OKYC or a CKYC, are very unique examples. And so, ideally, you expect these kind of changes to be driven by the younger population, more tech savvy people who are the digital millennials, and the Gen X will seamlessly follow, because then they understand that this is a change which they can identify with. But look at the way it is getting adopted by the classical traditional baby boomers, or for people who are on the the elderly segment. The fear of health, the fear of this entire redefining of social norms is forcing people, albeit with an anxiety of will this transaction go through? Will I have a dispute? How will I resolve it? So it throws up its own attendant problems. But the change is getting pushed in a very unique way. And that is a reality. So we see number of walk-ins coming down, the reaching out. I mean, look at this forum that we are talking about. I mean, ideally, a conference at this scale would have been on a face-to-face basis with a crowd. But here, in a digital space, there is exchange of ideas happening, exploring the various thoughts. So I think this is here to stay. COVID is going to, it's not a one standard, two standard, like one of my colleagues described it in one of our internal meetings. It's a deviation which you cannot define, which none of us could imagine. And therefore, our ability to reimagine the way we are handling this change is going to be unique. Even merchants in the first world, when Anirban was talking about it, people used to avoid cards and any kind of a digital transactions for reasons that all of us know. But today, the fear of losing business, the fear that your consumer is demanding something in a digital way, right from your newspaper man to the guys who are delivering, they're all shifting over. And if that we can combine with the digital exhaust fund flow and help them to make their inventory turn multiple times, we have winner in our hands. And so how we use this opportunity, how do we distill out those needs, is what the banking system and the extended ecosystem needs to make the best use of.
Fantastic. So I think with that, good time to go to Sajid. Sajid, I think, we are talking of the same era, the pandemic situation we have now. And people are conflicted, right? They would have had their own insecurities, or something that didn't take them towards digital payments in the past. But this dissonance is getting resolved. They are, experimenting, even if the per person usage may be lower. The number of users coming into the space itself is much higher today. How do you see these habits evolving? More importantly, what I want to ask you is, are these new habits, going to be everlasting? How long do you think these new habits, need to continue, need to persist? in a manner that they become sustainable even in the post-pandemic world? And what do you think the industry needs to do to create that sustainable change?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very interesting, and these are foundation sort of points, and I touched upon some of them. I mean, I would say, I mean, there are two parts to your question, right? Like, so let's take the first one around, the change in behavior and what pandemics sort of brought about. And see, the fact is, and history's taught us this, that real change really comes when people are faced with some sort of an existential crisis, right? And I don't mean that just as a means of like life and death, though this is clearly one of those. But generally, even organizations, right? Like whether they can survive or make it through, or whether you launch a product and whether you exist depends on the launch of that product or not. And so true change, or really sort of change that matters, when you're faced with an existential moment. And this is clearly that, right? And in so many ways, I feel than to some extent 2016. This sort of pandemic has driven behavior in so many different ways. I don't think many people could have predicted. For instance, like one of the things we saw is as the lockdown started, and the intensity of the lockdown was pretty high in the first sort of 6 weeks to 7 weeks, if you will. Look, our transactions did drop, right? Like, so total volumes, etc., everything that we saw really dropped. But what we saw on the other hand was that the way that people were either paying their bills or recharging their was like going up, right? Fairly significantly. So we could start to see these things moving literally in front of our eyes as we were serving our users. I think to the second point that you made, are these habits going to stick? I think, Praveen, the way that I think of this is that the habits are actually, they've been around for a very long time. And what do I mean by that? It's like paying bills. It's like buying something. It is recharging your phone. It is sending money to someone. So I view those as habits that have been around for a very long time. It's the way that you conducted or sort of acted on these habits that are now evolving. And therefore, are those actions, right? Are they going to stick? Are they going to stay? Look, it's very hard to predict that. But I do think that what this crisis has shown, and this is not some short-lived crisis. We've been now kind of fighting this in one form or the other since kind of January, in the middle of March, right? So this 4 or 5 months, people have seen this. As you pointed out, it's funny, in an age where people sort of want to celebrate identity, really being faceless is actually what matters, right? It's the way you think of it. So this is something that has now happened now over 4 months, 5 months. It will continue for some while yet. Nobody yet knows how much longer. And so it is getting to a point where behavior changes when you keep doing it repetitively. It is now in a place where things are happening repetitively. And Madhi made the point about cards, etc., and all. And what's happening now is that people are not walking into shops holding wads of cash. They're calling up someone, calling up their shopkeeper, and they're sending money digitally and having stuff delivered, right? And when they realize that, hold on a minute, actually is something that works. And yes, do we need to get better as an ecosystem? Of course, we have a lot of work to do to make it more reliable, to make sure that those transactions move along. But does it work? Yes, it does. Is it safe? It is. Why would I walk and start walking? And so that time I save, I'm going to go and use in other things, right? I'm not, there's so many other things that you could do, which you then save. And so I think this is a very secular shift in what we're seeing, and it saves time. I think it makes things more secure, and if nothing else, I actually think that transactions and value will increase significantly, and we are seeing that.
Thanks, Ajit. So clearly, I think a lot of behavioral change in these times, whether it is people trying to get fitter or saving time and discovering something else in themselves or trying digital payments is all going to be sustainable. And that's really the trend that we are seeing. So that's great. So, over to you, Anirban, and I think this is a good time to look at, and Sajid closed with saying how people are really, paying the merchant and ordering offline. How does this fit with how the merchant is seeing it? Does the merchant look at this as oh my God, it's a pain I need to deal with for some time, and until this whole thing is over, then I get my, my life back to normal? Or are they also seeing value in this? Does this fit with a merchant's image, a self-image of being progressive and, being up with the times in terms of providing the kind of, service they wish to provide? What's the tipping point for the merchant, in your view? And I'd also like you to take it further from there, and talk about what after the pandemic situation. If you look at the next few years to come, what would be some messages that you would like to leave behind, to really drive this in a very sustainable way for change, consumer behavior change? And when I say consumer, I think here it's the users. We have the consumer on one side, we have the merchant on the other side.
Yes. So let's start with merchants and COVID. See, we have seen massively more signups, right? From a regular rate of signing up small merchants, right? All large merchants are already digitized. We have seen 100,000 more merchants come into the fold. That's not a small number relative to, because our baseline itself is growing very fast. And we see, today the merchant is doing it because there is no way of doing business, right? I think it's our collective challenge to make that stick. So, things like using the digital exhaust for, it's actually a very powerful term, to then do merchant cash advances, etc. That is what is going to make it sticky. But merchants across all categories are adopting, right? Because there is no other way. That's the consumers are not going to walk in anytime soon. This is, it is, change. It's forced change upon everybody. But that change is happening. We are seeing every category grow significantly, right? Healthcare. I hadn't seen digital transactions in healthcare before. I hadn't seen as much in Kirana shops as much as we are seeing now. And it is not only, look, earlier the payment paradigm was there is a big POS or there's a big website with a PG. That is not there, right? It's what Sajid said. It's much more omni-channel. It is whatever. I call my merchant and then he sends me a link through the SMS, right? It's on WhatsApp, I get something. It's a QR code. It is omni-channel. It's wherever. He can email me, WhatsApp me, SMS me. It's conversational commerce is how we call it. But it's really omni-channel across any touch points and across any kinds of journeys. Sometimes, you will order it online, but go pick it up or pick the delivery. And, as long as we build solutions across all their touch points and across all their channels and integrate it, right? And we provide that broader platform, I think today we are seeing the trend, very increasing, very encouraging trend on the merchant side, but you have to make it stick, right? And I think it's also that at least in the, I think from a consumer perspective, if I may, we have to, we are seeing many first-time new consumers as well, to what Sajid said, across all payment types, cards, Google Pay, all kinds of UPI, all kinds of wallets. Every quarter we see a certain rise in paying for the first time. We call them first-time digital into the system. Number has 30%. It's anyway a very rapidly growing number. We have seen 40% growth on top of that just in the last couple of months on. I think COVID has given this to us. I think when I think about future of payments, right, there are 3 or 4 things very quickly. I think trust is really important. Resolving disputes, that base layer as new people come in, hand-holding them is really important. Many people, if anything happens in their first 5 to 10 transactions, and they're not able to resolve it quickly, not able to get money back, and there's a lot of fraud out there, right? That is where we see the challenge, right? Both as merchants, as payment system operators, as networks, as banks, as issuers, right? Collectively, we have to create more trust and better dispute resolution mechanisms. I think that's almost the base layer of what is in the future. But then I think in the future, on the consumer side, I think it's 2 larger innovations we have to drive, right? One is more credit at the point of sale, right? What is better than your own cash is cash flow management, right? I get money from that I deserve, that I can borrow at reasonable rates to purchase, right? It's credit at point of sale that will fuel very significant adoption. It's also solving for non-smartphones, right? Smartphone and the digital revolution in India is massive, right? Thanks to Geo, 4Gs, smartphones, but there will always be a significant non-smartphone population, and we have to solve for them in more ways. We have to, create as many forms of payments as possible through biometric, through face recognition, get more and more sophisticated on that front. And for merchants, I think it's again, right, digitizing the merchant, I think is the other really big challenge. We are just in, I think we are in innings one of a 7 innings baseball game as far as digitizing small merchants goes. We have to go many layers. All of us have to work together. And there are 30 million of these merchants, right? And probably 3 million of them are digitized today. Those, that journey has, when these things has options of paying, not enough people get credit at the point of sale. There is trust and dispute resolution mechanisms of altogether a different order. And you have all merchants who have payments that they don't have to spend a lot of money getting onto the payments bandwagon. Then I think that's the future, when I think all of Indian payments are digital. So we have lots of work to do.
Thank you. that was quite a mouthful and a mindful for all of us here. But you said it very rightly. I think we are still in the early phase of the game, and as you put it, I think a lot more to be done on the merchant side. And I think we're continuously coming back to the point of saying, let's build the value props. Let's solve the problems. Let's make it work for them, and then the behavior happens, as an outcome and as a result of that. So Sajid, I'll come back to you for a bit of crystal gazing here. Anirban kicked it off with some perspective on the merchant side. How do you think after this run of good growth, users coming on board, we still have the late adopters to win over. We still have I think people perhaps with certain demographic profiles, psychographic profiles, who might need to get stronger in their confidence, self-confidence of themselves. A lot of people would be saying, what, I can't do this. I can't get into this webinar because, I don't know how this thing works, right? So there is this mental barrier to overcome. So how do you think that will play out, and what more needs to be done as we move forward in the coming years to drive this change to the last person?
The best way to be wrong is to try and predict the future. I think we all know that. So let me do my best to be wrong. I would say though that, look, we are in day one, right? We are in day one of this journey. But I read this beautiful thing the other day, beautiful line the other day. I will not take credit. I can't take credit for it. I read it somewhere. I can't quite remember where or who said it, but now is the time where we need more dashboards, not forecasts, right? Because we literally, I mean, it's just really, really hard for me to be able to tell you, Madhi, Anirban, that, hey, by the way, I think in December we should be able to do this, right? Like, can you imagine all those people who Vision 2020 plans? I mean, like, what a... So I told my team, no Vision 2025 plans, right? Like, I mean, I can tell you at Google, my colleagues there, but we're not making 25 plans, at this moment. So it's very difficult. But I would say this, to the point that you raised about, so what's required, right? Like, there's a whole set that we aren't even serving. There are even like my parents, etc., right? We aren't even serving them. Look, the fundamentals that matter in the business that we do are like unshakable, right? And that is, and Anirban even touched upon some of them, but reliability is like super critical. Trust and safety, absolutely essential. And third, places to pay, right? So look, if you're reliable, if you are safe, and there are enough places where you can use, everything starts from that. And just no matter, and you all have spent far more years and have far more experience in this industry than I can lay claim to. But just any which way that I look at it as a student of this industry, any business that does not get that right, in mostly pretty much any, actually, is going to struggle, right, to kind of build on top of that. Because look, if you can offer a lot of bells and whistles, but if it's a product that doesn't work, and if it's an offering that doesn't work, uh, you will not have a business beyond a point in time. So I think being reliable, safe and secure, and having places to pay is going to be very, very critical for our for the future of our business, and that's what I call.
Thank you. And I was wondering when we would come to that point about the ubiquity of payments and the network effect that it would have, because that I think has been one of the biggest drivers of change as well. After the initial point, most people actually say the first time they started using UPI, for example, was when somebody in their friends and family circle told them that it's great, and I use it, and why don't you? So the network effect and the creating the ubiquity of usage and acceptance, creating the sweet spot is, I think, Sajid, where you close that off. Great there. And Madhi, this is to you for the final round of the evening. And when you look at the banks, I think, and we spoke about it sort of in the course of the conversation, we keep coming back to value prop and what it takes. So we spoke of convenience and solving the basic problem, and then we got the network effect, and then the loyalty of trust, reliability, yeah, and all of that coming together. But what more needs to be done? Are there other problems to be solved for the user which go beyond the basics of what we're talking about? And I think you touched upon credit, for example, some time back. What is it that needs to be done to make this change last beyond where we stand today?
Now, Pravina, I started my career in FMCG straight out of campus. And then at that time, what was important in that world was sales and distribution, unique ability to create brands which are built on trust. Nothing has changed. The last 20, 25 years, I have been the banking side of the business, where we were told that unlike a physical product that you sell, banking, whether it's payments, whether it's a bunch of processes which are tied together and which make magic happen. Because at the end of the day, if anything can be digitized, it's money. So when you look at the era when we started off with, the hot topic was business process reengineering. I mean, how do you reimagine your processes so that you're able to drive great value and efficiency? In today's world, when you're asking us to crystal gaze, I'll take Sajid's advice. I would rather prefer a dashboard than being a Nostradamus. But today, just these two laws, the Moore's law and the McLeod law, have redefined the marketplace. It's no more the physical marketplace. And the people in this room, I mean, we are the most oldest traditional as bankers, who will always be regulated, who continue to be regulated. People like Sajid love to hate us because for every innovative idea that he brings to the table, I'll say, yeah, ye thoda mushkil hai. So, and most of all, our audience is the fintechs. So think of it as trying to put together a bundle of journeys and experiences. But at the same time, ensuring that the trust, because at the end of the day, we are repositors of people's money. So how do you establish that trust? How do you ensure that anxiety keeps going down? Like Anirban pointed out, you come across any channel, but if the dispute resolution doesn't happen, no matter what you do, when he comes face to face with you, he can fight with you and get things resolved. But imagine this happening in the digital world. Yeah, paisa chala gaya, kahan pahunch gaya? I have no idea. Am I able to turn it around? What are those processes in the back end? How do we interact with each other? It defines entire networking aspects as well as the ability to process in that small chip, which is called the phone, as redefined it beautifully. So for me, we will move away, at least my understanding is, and also to take care of what you spoke about, what are the various use cases. We will move away from that of a bunch of specifically well-defined products into a concept called embedded banking. The way Sajid evolves is, let's say, the payment mechanisms or interaction mechanisms, or the way Anirban will come and build processes of acquiring merchants and machinery. If banks can find a way of moving away from that mobile phone into those various journeys that people are willing to define, and we embed ourselves there and move away from that of being a structural banking to a contextual banking, I think that's where we will be able to live up to a reputation, while at the same time building the trust, ensuring the guardrails, which is what this regulation is all about. I think it's so unique. So customer experience, trust, anxiety reduction, and the ability to blend ourselves as per whoever is willing to build a use case. It could be the big techs like the PayUs and the Googles, or it could be the fintechs, which is a long tail. How we as banks can cater to both these, obviously supported by people like NPCI, RBI, and whatnot. So
Thank
I
you
think
so much.
that's the way the bank is, I mean, the world is going.
Yes,
My
small
mind.
tech.
Thank you so much, Madhi. That was great. I think with a bunch of at the heart product practitioners and professionals here. I think this is what we should have expected. Just get the proposition right, get the reliability, get the trust, get the integrity, embed, collaborate, and we'll make the proposition work and create the pull factor and bring everybody onto our sides, right? So lay the roads, create the network, let the cars run, and whether it is a Royal Enfield, or is it a regular sedan, or somebody who's creating the autonomous car, then we leave it to the players to drive, to create the magic on top of the network of roads.
Yes,
Um, Fantastic. Thank you so much, all of you. Anirban, thank you, Madhi, Sajid, and I think we are done.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, panelists, for a lovely, lively session. We told at the start it's a panelist of heavyweights, and we really lived up to the expectation. Thanks a lot for a wonderful session. This is where we end. See you all. Stay safe.